Good afternoon. My name is Farmin, and I'm a full-stack developer working in a company called Digital Attitude based in Milan. Today, I'll be talking about infrastructure as code in general, and specifically CDK, AWS CDK. And let's do this. OK. So before diving into the CDK and all of the details, let's see what is infrastructure as code and why we need infrastructure as code. So for us, the infrastructure, the definition is the resources and the services that we use for deploying our code and using for our products. So we use AWS, and of course, our resource will be Lambdas, DynamoDBs, even pipelines, code pipelines, everything that we have on AWS. And when we start to do the products, first thing that we do is defining the architecture. And for that architecture, we start to write what we need. And I need this document. I want to say that, OK, I want a DynamoDB table with this ID as a partition. I want a Lambda that has write access, read access to this Dynamo, and then go on. And then the good thing about this document is that whenever I want to deploy, I use this document with the resource provisioner to the new account, or if I have new application, I just use this document. So basically, this is the code that we have. And why I need this? So we have thousands of resources on AWS, and we just every day add these resources. And for each product, maybe we need to redeploy on new account. So we cannot just adding manually these resources, going to the web console and add it. First of all, it's closed to the developers, so developers, they don't have access to create resources on web console. They need to do that by code. Why? Because they make mistakes. And then we would have dev account full of resources that we don't use, test 1, test 2, test 3, you know. And second of all, this is the best way to do that. Second, deployment environments. We have test environment, production, and then we have one account per developer. And we need to keep these accounts identical. So each developer will test the code on his account, and of course, we make sure that this will work on test account, because the resources, the configuration of the services is the same. Then reusability and scalability. So as an example, we have a product on AWS Marketplace. We don't know in each day how many clients are coming. So maybe one day we have 10 clients. We cannot just do it by hands. We need automation for that. And we need to make everything, give the endpoint to the client. Last but not least, the important is versioning in Git. We need to have a feature to roll back to the infrastructure that we have 1 month ago and see that what is the difference. Maybe we make mistakes, so we should go back. Another thing is that each developer will add these resources every day. So for doing review for the code, understanding that what we are adding to the infrastructure, we need to use GitHub to review the code and see what we are adding. Today's talking, these are the famous solutions for doing infrastructure as code. So CloudFormation, so AWS service. There are other third parties like Terraform and Serverless Framework. Then it's SAM, it's very cool. It's cool for serverless. Does local debugging, local testing, and Amplify, which basically is maybe it's good for the front-end developers. We started by AWS CloudFormation from the first day doing the product. So it was good. You still have all of the benefits that you want for the code for infrastructure as code. It works. You just write the YAML file, JSON file, give it to CloudFormation, and it will deploy it on AWS with all of the resources. You can do from 0 to 100, covering all of the stuff. But then, at some point, you see this. At some point, the application gets big. Actually, this is not big. This is like a Dynamo, Lambda, and API. And that it's 300 lines of code. And we arrived at the point that we had a couple of products. They were related together. We had dependencies that one bucket was using in another stack, 10 stacks that they share a role. So if you open the file, you just freak out. So it happened to me that one day I was saying that, OK, I'm going to do this. Passing 3 days, I still was doing configuring CloudFront, and I had an error, and I was waiting 40 minutes. So you leave it, you quit the work and kill everyone and go home. So then we found our stairways to heaven. So it was CDK. About a year ago, internal team of AWS, they started a project for doing infrastructure as code by writing the language that you write to product. So for us, it's JavaScript. But then, of course, they support TypeScript, .NET, Java, and recently they added Python. It's open source, so you have a community behind it. So if you have an issue, it happens a lot to us that we had an issue, we write it, and then after a couple of hours, someone answer, and then you see it in the next version. It's beta, but it's working. We are using it in production. It's now version 35. We were using it when it was 0.9, so it's good. It's working. And the concept is basically it's a layer on top of CloudFormation. So you have all of the benefits, all of the stuff with CloudFormation. But when you want to write it, you don't want to write YAML file. You don't want to write 1,000 lines of code. You write it in the language that you do product. And the concept of stacks is equivalent concept of stacks that we have on CloudFormation. And then we have constructs, which are basically the service and services that we have in AWS. So it's bucket, so it's one construct. And the way that we define them is like this. It's in JavaScript. So 1 line of code, no, not 20 lines of code. This has some props that defaults. But if you want to also have a specific configuration, you pass it as a third parameter. So it's really cool. 1 line, you do this. I put this example. It's the same example that we had with 320 lines of code with the YAML file. As you can see, it's 12 lines of code. It's completely readable for a JavaScript developer. It's in new bucket. You create new bucket. Create Lambda function. You pass. In the props, you say that which environment you want to use, which environment variable you want to pass, what role it should have, and that's it. And then API gateway doing it with the YAML file is. And you see, it's really easy to do that. And then a month ago, I was implementing a product, and I just got into this example. And when I saw this, I said that, okay, I need to share this to the world. And it's basically, it's very hard. It's like, I saw this. When you want to do this with the YAML file, you need to do with custom resources, and you need to write a Lambda as a custom resource. And I don't know how many days it takes to do that, because it's DNS validation. You need to have a Lambda to wait on that and confirms that the certificate is valid. But you do it with 8 lines of code, and it was really good. So we used it, and basically with that, we had 0 to 100 infrastructure as code for all of our products. Then another story was that we started with CloudFormation, so we had stacks, we had YAML file, and then we decided to go on with CDK. So we didn't want to do the transition in 1 second, because you cannot, because there's a production, and you cannot just remove resources and add them. So we wanted to use that YAML file and then start CDK and using that YAML file inside of our SDK. So easily, we just imported this YAML file and referenced to the resources that we had, and that's it. And smoothly, after a couple of months, we just created new stacks, and now we have 100% everything in CDK. CDK has command line interface, so you can initialize the app. It gives you it gives us the infrastructure, like folders, the files, and other stuff, the structure for programming, and then it has the command line list for listing the stacks, deploy, which you can run it locally on your PC, or you can, if you have a pipeline, you can run it with code build. So you can deploy it there with a pipeline. So infrastructure as a real code. I didn't invent it. I stole it from Twitter. And this is a really cool title. It's a real code. So we do it with JavaScript, the code that I do every day. I love it. Now that I'm talking, we have about 30 stacks on CDK, all done by CDK, multi-region. So some of the stacks are deployed on US. Some of them are in Ireland. And I know that they have best practices, because behind of it, CDK will give us these best practices. I don't care about how they do the YAML file, but I know that they have. We have code completion. So before that, you have CloudFormation, and always you have a Chrome tab, documentation of CloudFormation for the types and everything, and every time that you need to check. But I use VS Code. I have code completion. So every time that I write new bucket, I just go to the properties, control space, and I see all of the props with the types and everything, and I add it. So I don't go out from my VS Code, things that I really love. And another feature is private construct. It's really cool, because we have different products, and they have some common resources like authentication. So we use Cognito every time, the same configuration for all of our products. And we didn't copy these resources, and copy these codes for all of the products. So instead, we have private package, which implement Cognito, and then we import it in all of our products. And when we want to change the configuration or add something, we just go to the private package, change it, and update the version of the package that we have in our products. And the only downside I saw was actually the first weeks, let's say, that we were working. It was a little bit challenging because it's a new way to do that, so it's not really common writing the infrastructure with the code. But then it just became really good because you can just use all of the features that you do with the JavaScript or whatever language that you write. So that was CDK, and hope that you give it a try. If you don't have infrastructure as code, please have it. And if you have using CloudFormation, just give it a try and use CDK. Thank you. This is Farmin.